Ethan Carter wiped the sweat from his brow, squinting against the blazing sun of Krellis, a harsh planet far from Earth. As a young human cadet assigned to the first peacekeeping mission on this alien world, he had been thrust into the heart of a hostile environment. His mission was simple: help establish a human colony in the desert-like landscape of Krellis and assist in opening peaceful relations with its alien inhabitants. But nothing about this mission had been easy. The Krell, the planet's native species, were huge, powerful warriors who had kept to themselves for centuries. They were known for their fierce nature and terrifying strength, often seen as enemies by neighboring planets. Yet, despite their fearsome reputation, the humans were tasked with opening dialogue and peaceful coexistence with them. Ethan, still a new recruit, had little experience in this kind of negotiation. His team, consisting of seasoned soldiers, was far from welcoming. They barely noticed him most days, seeing him as a young, inexperienced cadet who would never contribute much. But Ethan wasn't bothered. He was determined to prove himself. Today, his team had been assigned to patrol the outskirts of a remote village, near a known Krell stronghold. The landscape was barren, with nothing but sand dunes stretching as far as the eye could see. The heat was oppressive, and every step felt heavier as the sun beat down on them. Despite his discomfort, Ethan stayed focused, scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. Then the signal came: Kalok. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Kalok was a name that carried weight in every corner of the galaxy. He was one of the Krell's most feared warriors, known for his brutality and strength. No one had seen him in years, and rumors swirled that he had been exiled by his own people after a violent act that led to his disgrace. Many thought he was dead. But the transmission from headquarters was clear. Kalok was alive, and he was out there, somewhere in the vast desert. Ethan's team geared up for the worst. The idea of encountering Kalok was terrifying, and the soldiers were ready for a fight. But Ethan felt something different, a strange pull. He had heard the stories of the Krell, of their fierce warriors, but Ethan had always believed that there was more to them than just violence. He knew it was dangerous to think this way, but something deep inside him urged him to consider the possibility that Kalok wasn't just a monster. As the team approached a narrow canyon, the atmosphere grew tense. The sandstorm that had been brewing for hours now engulfed them, reducing visibility. The howling wind and swirling sand made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Suddenly, a massive shape emerged from the dust, blocking their path. Towering over them was Kalok, the legendary Krell warrior. His enormous frame, adorned with battle scars and gleaming armor, cast a long shadow over the group. For a moment, there was silence. The soldiers gripped their weapons, unsure of what to do. Ethan, however, stood frozen, looking up at Kalok with wide eyes. Kalok's gaze met Ethan's. The wind howled around them, but in that moment, Ethan couldn't tear his eyes away from the giant warrior. What would happen now? Was he about to face death, or something else entirely? The wind howled through the canyon, swirling sand around them. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes locked on Kalok, the towering Krell warrior who had appeared out of the dust like a ghost. His massive form blocked the narrow path, his glowing red eyes staring down at Ethan with an unreadable expression. The rest of Ethan's team was on edge, their hands hovering near their weapons, but no one made a move. For a long moment, no one spoke. Ethan could feel the tension building, thick as the storm surrounding them. His team was ready for a fight, but Ethan, despite all the fear in his chest, didn't want violence. There was something about Kalok, something that told him there was more to this warrior than just destruction. Kalok finally spoke, his deep voice cutting through the howling winds. "You are human," he said slowly, the words heavy with both curiosity and caution. His voice was deeper than any sound Ethan had ever heard, like the rumble of distant thunder. Ethan's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was the moment. He could either choose to fight or try to do something no one else had ever done. Talk to this alien, this warrior? Yes, Ethan said, his voice steady. I am human. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm part of a peacekeeping mission from Earth. Kalok's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Ethan. The giant warrior's massive hands were wrapped around a large weapon. But he didn't raise it. He seemed to be waiting for something. Ethan wasn't sure what, but he knew this was a delicate moment. You are not like the others, Kalok said. They fear me. They wish for my death. His tone was not angry, just matter of fact. Ethan swallowed hard, the words from his team echoing in his mind. They want to fight you, he said, trying to be as honest as he could without sounding like a fool. But I think you don't want that. Kalok's eyes flashed with something. Maybe surprise, maybe something deeper, and he tilted his head, studying Ethan in a way that made the young soldier feel like he was being analyzed on a deeper level than he could understand. You are different, Kalok grumbled. Humans are not known for their patience or kindness, yet you approach me with respect. Ethan stood a little taller, despite his heart still pounding in his chest. I believe there's more to everyone than just fear or violence, he said. You're a warrior, but maybe you want something more than fighting. I know the humans I've worked with. We've all got our own reasons for being here. Maybe we're not so different. Kalok seemed to think about this, his expression unreadable. The wind picked up again, sending sand swirling around them, but neither of them flinched. For the first time, Kalok lowered his weapon slightly, just enough to show he was listening, not attacking. You think peace is possible? He asked, the rumble in his voice softening just a fraction. Ethan nodded, his mind racing with the weight of the conversation. I think it's worth trying. Kalok studied him for another long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke again, his voice quieter, but still filled with power. I have not known peace for many cycles. Perhaps you are right. Ethan blinked, surprised by the shift in Kalok's demeanor. Was it possible that a man like this could change? Could someone like him, feared by so many, want peace as well? For the first time since their meeting, Kalok stepped back, lowering his weapon completely. You have courage, human. I will listen. For now. Ethan exhaled deeply, his heart still racing, but a small sense of hope started to rise within him. This was not going to be easy, but for the first time, it felt like the impossible might just be possible. Over the next few days, Ethan and Kalok began to spend more time together. At first, the rest of Ethan's team didn't understand. They'd watched from a distance, confused and concerned, while Ethan and Kalok held quiet conversations. The team was still on edge. Sergeant Davis, the leader of the team, was openly hostile toward Kalok. You can't trust him, Carter, Davis would say every time Ethan tried to explain. He's a warrior, a killer. He's not someone we can reason with. But Ethan didn't believe that. Every time he spoke to Kalok, he saw a different side of the alien warrior. Yes, Kalok had been raised to fight, to conquer, but there was something else within him, something more than just violence. One afternoon, after a training session with the team, Ethan found Kalok sitting by a campfire, looking out over the desert horizon. The sand stretched endlessly, the red sky dimming with the approaching night. The atmosphere was calm, and Ethan approached carefully, taking a seat beside the giant warrior. Why you help me? Kalok asked suddenly, his deep voice breaking the silence. Most humans would fear me. Most would attack on sight. Ethan glanced at him, surprised by the question. He didn't know exactly why he felt so drawn to Kalok. Maybe it was because, despite the warrior's reputation, Ethan saw something more, something worthy of understanding. I think you're more than just a soldier, Ethan said, his voice steady. You've been through a lot, just like anyone. You're looking for something that's hard to find. Peace. Maybe you don't know it yet, but I think you've been searching for that. Kalok turned his gaze toward Ethan, his expression unreadable. I have not known peace for many cycles. All I know is war. Ethan nodded slowly, knowing that Kalok's past was full of pain and hardship. He could see it in his eyes. The years of battle and loss. There's more to life than fighting, Ethan said, looking at the fire. I think you're ready to see that. You don't have to keep living in a world of violence. There's more out there. Peace isn't easy, but it's worth trying for. Kalok was silent for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as he considered Ethan's words. You are a strange human, he said finally, a hint of curiosity in his tone. Most would say I am beyond redemption. You believe differently. I don't know if I'd call you beyond redemption, Ethan replied. But I do believe that anyone can change. It's not easy, but you have to start somewhere. Kalok's gaze softened just a little. And you think that starting with me is the answer? Ethan smiled slightly. I think it's worth a try. The desert wind stirred, and the two sat together in silence, the flames flickering in front of them. Ethan felt a sense of peace in this moment, sitting next to a warrior who had once been an enemy to many. But now, in this quiet place, there was something different, something hopeful. For the first time, it felt like both of them were on the path to something better. Ethan wasn't sure what the future would hold, but he knew one thing for certain. He had made the right choice. By seeing Kalok as more than just a warrior, he had opened the door to a future that neither of them had expected. As the days passed, Ethan and Kalok spent more time together, and their bond began to grow. The other members of the team were still skeptical, and Sergeant Davis was growing increasingly frustrated with Ethan's decision to befriend the alien warrior. You're making a mistake, Carter, Davis said one afternoon as they sat by the base's entrance. We're here to protect Earth's interests, not make friends with dangerous creatures. Kalok may seem calm now, but we all know what he's capable of. Ethan didn't respond immediately, staring out at the horizon where Kalok was training. The massive Krell warrior was practicing with his weapon, his movements fluid and precise, each strike sending a gust of wind through the sand. Despite his intimidating presence, there was something almost graceful about the way he moved, a reflection of his skill and discipline. I understand what you're saying, but he's not like we thought, Ethan replied, his voice calm but firm. Kalok wants peace. He's tired of the endless fighting. He's looking for something different. Davis shook his head, clearly unconvinced. You're too naive, Carter. You're treating him like he's one of us. Ethan didn't let the words bother him. He knew what he believed. He could see the change in Kalok, even if no one else could. The giant alien had begun to show signs of a deeper, hidden side, a warrior who had lived through endless battles, but was now questioning his place in the world. That evening, after the training session, Ethan walked over to where Kalok was sitting by the campfire. The warrior was cleaning his weapon, his large hands moving with care. The glow of the fire flickered across his scared face, casting long shadows. Kalok looked up as Ethan approached, his deep eyes meeting his. Have you found what you seek, human? Kalok asked, his voice a low rumble. Ethan sat down beside him. I think I've found something worth fighting for. Peace, maybe. But it's not easy, is it? Kalok was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the fire. I have lived a life of battle. Peace is an enemy to a warrior. It is not something I can simply claim. He paused, then added, but you believe it's possible. Ethan nodded. I believe that if we try, if we're willing to change, peace can happen. It might take time, but we can start with small steps. Kalok's expression softened slightly. You are unlike others. You are patient with me. I do not understand why. Ethan smiled faintly. Because I see that you want more than just to fight. I see the strength in you, Kalok, but I also see that you're tired. Tired of the endless war. I think you're ready for something else. The Krell warrior stared into the fire for a long time, his thoughts unreadable. Then, slowly, he spoke again. Perhaps I am ready. Perhaps it is time to learn what lies beyond war. Ethan's heart swelled with hope. Kalok was beginning to understand. This was the start of something bigger than both of them, a chance to change the fate of not just one warrior, but an entire species. As the fire crackled between them, Ethan knew they were not just allies. They were something more, partners in a journey neither of them had ever expected to take. The days on Krellis continued to pass slowly, and Ethan and Kalok began to form an unexpected bond. Ethan's fellow soldiers were still wary of the Krell warrior, but Ethan's belief in peace kept him determined. He had witnessed Kalok's strength, but he had also seen the warrior's desire for change. Despite the growing tension among the team, Ethan found himself spending more time with Kalok, who seemed eager to learn about Earth and its people. They often sat together by the campfire, sharing stories of their worlds, their battles, and the things that had shaped them. Kalok listened intently, always asking questions, as though he were trying to understand what it meant to be human. One evening, after a long day of training, Ethan and Kalok sat by the fire as the sky above them began to darken. The stars were beginning to appear, scattered like diamonds across the night sky. The air had cooled slightly, and the crackling fire provided the only light. "You have told me much about your world," Kalok said quietly, his deep voice filling the space between them. "But I still do not understand something. Why do your people seek peace when the universe is full of conflict? What is the purpose of peace if it brings only weakness?" Ethan thought for a moment, staring into the fire. The question was not new, but it was one he had spent a lot of time thinking about. He knew Kalok's view of the world was shaped by years of battle and survival. For Kalok, strength had always meant power and dominance. Peace, in his eyes, was something foreign, something soft. "Peace isn't about being weak," Ethan said slowly, his voice steady. "It's about strength in a different way. It's the strength to stand up for others, to protect what matters, not through violence, but through understanding." Kalok watched him carefully. "You think that we are weak because we fight?" he asked, his voice low but tinged with curiosity. "No," Ethan replied. "Fighting isn't weakness, but it's not the only way. Strength comes in many forms. For us, sometimes it's about finding common ground, building trust, and learning from each other. It's not always easy, but it's worth it." The Krell warrior sat in silence for a while, looking at the stars. The fire flickered between them, casting shadows on his rugged face. Kalok was thinking, Ethan could tell. For a moment, Ethan wondered if the warrior was questioning everything he had ever known. "You are different from your soldiers," Kalok said finally, breaking the silence. "They want only to fight, but you want to learn. Why?" Ethan shrugged, a small smile on his face. "Maybe it's because I don't believe everything has to end in violence. I want to understand, to see the world from other perspectives. Maybe we're not so different, Kalok. Maybe we both want the same thing." Kalok's expression softened, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. It was as if the warrior was starting to see the truth in Ethan's words. "I have spent many years fighting," Kalok said quietly, "but I wonder if there is more to life than this. You make me think there is." Ethan felt a surge of hope. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when Kalok, the mighty warrior, began to believe in something beyond war. It was the beginning of a new journey for both of them, a journey they would walk together, one step at a time. The days on Krellis continued to grow colder as Ethan and Kalok spent more time together. It had been weeks since the encounter in the desert, and what had started as a simple rescue mission was now evolving into something much bigger. Ethan could feel the change in himself as well as in Kalok. The warrior was beginning to open up, his thoughts shifting away from the violence that had always defined his life. One evening, after a long day of training, Ethan sat with Kalok by the campfire, watching the sky above them. The stars were brighter now, and the air felt different, cooler, calmer. The fire crackled between them, casting flickering shadows across Kalok's massive frame. The warrior was quiet, his usual stern expression softening in the light of the flames. "You've come a long way," Ethan said, breaking the silence. He leaned back against a rock, looking at the warrior beside him. "I never thought I'd be sitting here, talking about peace with someone like you." Kalak didn't look at him right away. He stared into the fire, deep in thought. "I have lived my life in battle," he said, his voice low but steady. "Fighting is all I have known. Peace, it feels like a foreign concept to me." Ethan nodded. He knew how deeply Kalak was entrenched in his past, how hard it must be to change. "It's not easy, I know. But you're not the same warrior you were before. I can see it in you." Kalak's eyes flickered toward Ethan, a hint of something in his gaze. Maybe doubt, maybe curiosity. "You think I can change? I think you already are," Ethan said, his voice quiet but full of conviction. "Every day, you're making choices that are different from the ones you used to make. You're learning to see things from a new perspective, just like I am. And that's strength, Kalak. Not the power to destroy, but the power to grow." Kalak didn't reply at first. He looked at Ethan, his gaze thoughtful. "I have spent many cycles fighting," he said slowly, his voice tinged with regret. "But now, I wonder if there is something else. I wonder if I can make a new path, a path that leads somewhere better." Ethan smiled, a sense of warmth spreading through him. "I think you can. We both can. We don't have to stay stuck in the past. We can make a future for ourselves, one where we don't have to fight anymore." For the first time in their time together, Kalak's face softened. The harsh lines of battle that had always marked his features seemed to fade just a little. "Perhaps you are right, human. Perhaps peace is not a weakness. Maybe it is the true strength." Ethan's heart raced at the words. He had never thought he would hear Kalak, this giant warrior who had lived for centuries in the brutal world of the Krell, speak like this. It was a breakthrough, and it made Ethan believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for a better future for them both. As the fire burned low, they sat in silence, not needing words. They both knew that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and doubt, but for the first time, they felt like they were heading in the right direction. Together, Ethan stood at the edge of the base, looking out across the desert. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the sand. The cool evening air felt like a welcome change after the scorching heat of the day. His thoughts were heavy, filled with everything that had happened over the past few weeks. Beside him stood Kalak, the giant warrior who had once been seen as an enemy to humanity, but now was something different. The two had spent months together, learning from each other, slowly building a bond that neither of them had expected. In the beginning, it had been hard to imagine how things could change. Kalak had been a symbol of everything Ethan had been trained to fear. But now, as they stood side by side, Ethan saw not a monster, but a warrior, one who had known nothing but war, but who was beginning to see the possibility of peace. "You've changed," Ethan said quietly, looking up at the Krell warrior. "You've come a long way since we first met." Kalak didn't immediately respond. Instead, he gazed out over the desert, his expression thoughtful. "I have spent my life in battle, human. I was born into war. But now I wonder if I can walk a different path." Ethan nodded, knowing what Kalak meant. He had seen the struggle in the warrior's eyes. It wasn't easy to change, to give up everything you had ever known. But Kalak had tried, and in Ethan's eyes, that was enough. "You've already walked part of that path," Ethan said. "Every day, you've made choices that show you want something different." Kalak turned his gaze to Ethan, his expression softening just slightly. "I do not know where this path will lead, but I am ready to see where it takes me. Perhaps I am ready to leave behind the war I was born into." Ethan smiled, feeling a surge of hope. "I think you're ready." For a long moment, the two stood in silence, the desert stretching out before them. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but he felt confident that whatever came next, they would face it together. "You know," Kalak said suddenly, his voice rumbling in the quiet evening, "I once believed that peace was a weakness, something to be avoided. But now, I see that strength comes in many forms. The strength to protect, the strength to change. Maybe this is what I've been looking for." Ethan turned to him, his eyes meeting Kalak's. The warrior's words were filled with conviction, and for the first time, Ethan truly believed that Kalak had found the path he had been searching for. "I think you found it," Ethan said, his voice firm, "and I'm glad I'm here to walk it with you." Kalak nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the desert one last time. "You are a strange human, Ethan Carter. But you are the one who showed me that peace is possible. You believed in me when no one else did." Ethan laughed softly. "I think I'm starting to believe in you too." The two of them stood there, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the desert. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. For the first time in their lives, both Ethan and Kalak had found something worth fighting for. Not war, but peace. And together, they would take the first steps toward a new beginning.